You ever walk into a room and before you've even had a chance to breathe, just know that everyone's already made up their mind about you? That's exactly how my morning began, sitting across from Victoria Sterling, Queen Bee of Sterling Dynamics, the kind of CEO who looks at you like your furniture she'd never buy. You know what I mean? The air in that boardroom was thick, five executives with those little polite smiles, like they were all in on the same private joke, and me, standing there, hand out, while Victoria practically recoiled like I tried to hand her a dead fish. I didn't move, just held my hand out for a beat too long, and you could see in her eyes, she thought she'd already won. "I don't shake hands with employees," she snapped, and man, that was her mistake right there. I just gave her this calm look, adjusted my watch, the way I do when I need to remind myself to play the long game, not let the little things get under my skin. Yeah, that happened. So I sat, listened to her drone on about our numbers speak for themselves, watched her flick through slides with a gold laser pointer, acting like I was invisible, just some consultant sent by the investors, a word she said like it was dirt in her mouth. What she and her cronies didn't know was 3 hours earlier, I'd rolled up to Sterling in my regular car, no flash, wearing my oldest suit not because I had to, but because I wanted to see how they treat someone who didn't look like money walking in the door. The receptionist made me wait 40 minutes on an ugly couch, while security hovered, trying to look casual. Every slight, every sideways look, every little test, I cataloged it because I needed to know exactly who I was dealing with. See, what none of them realized, not Victoria, not James Morrison, the VP, not even the intern pouring bitter coffee, was that Carter Global Investments, my firm, was considering putting $4 billion on the table. $4 billion that could change their company forever. But I wasn't just looking for numbers. I was looking for soul, or the lack of it. So when Victoria finished her little power trip of a presentation, she smirked and asked if I had any questions, her tone all bored impatience. I just leaned in and said, "Do you really think this behavior represents the values you want in a partner?" She laughed loud, sharp, looked around for backup. "Values? Mr. Carter, our only values are profit and results. I hope your superiors understand that." That's when I realized these people thought they'd already dismissed me. I almost felt sorry for them. Let me back up a sec, this wasn't my first rodeo. At 18, interning in Chicago, I'd watched black employees be talked down to like kids, told to fetch coffee while their ideas got snatched by someone with a better pedigree. At 25, pitching my first fund, I got thrown out 3 offices without even a handshake. Every door slammed became fuel. I learned to read people, learned to listen more than I spoke, memorize financials until they felt like music. So while Victoria paraded her excellence, I kept my poker face and waited. Twist here, while they were busy congratulating themselves, my phone buzzed. Marcus, my right hand, was sitting 6 blocks away, ready to move on phase 2 if I gave the word. He and I, we built Carter Global together, both of us carrying the scars of being underestimated. We'd seen this playbook 100 times. Marcus once got humiliated by a senior partner in front of clients. Afterward, I pulled him aside, told him I recognized real talent, and that's how we started building something that would change the game. Back to the room, Victoria, encouraged by all that fake laughter, tried to go for the jugular. She said, "People like us operate on a different level, proper education, the right circles." She gestured at the Manhattan skyline, like she owned it. "It must be hard for someone like you to grasp the complexity of our work." And I just smiled and said, "Interesting how some people confuse inherited privilege with earned competence." That hit her like a slap. She spun around, red-faced. "My family built this company from nothing," she snapped. "With a $50 million loan from your grandfather's trust," I said, voice soft, but everyone heard it. At that point, the room shifted. She called for the Meridian Project reports, thinking she'd bury me in paperwork. But what she didn't know, I'd already accessed everything legally available and found the cracks. 3 years behind schedule, $600 million over budget, and some numbers that didn't add up. I flipped through her fancy folder and quietly pointed out a line where they were reclassifying operating costs as research, which is the kind of thing that gets the feds interested. The silence that followed, you could have heard a pin drop. For the first time, they looked at me like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't who they thought I was. Right then, Victoria's phone rang, Her lawyer in a panic SEC was poking around, something about the Meridian Project. She started to unravel, and I could see her realize, too late, that the walls were closing in. At the same moment, my phone buzzed again. Marcus reporting that Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan were getting tips about ethical concerns at Sterling, investment suspended, headlines coming. Karma has a way of showing up on time, you know? But here's the kicker. As the meeting dragged on, Victoria's secretary burst in, breathless, saying the press was calling about racial discrimination allegations. Racial discrimination? Victoria screeched, eyes wild. That's when I calmly pulled out my recorder, set it on the table, and let her know that, in New York, I only needed my own consent to record. I'd captured every word, every sneer, every thinly veiled insult. That's illegal. Morrison shouted. Actually, it's not, I replied, cool as ever. And then, just as the boardroom chaos peaked, the chairman called in, voice cold as steel. Victoria, explain why we're trending for racism. By now, the Sterling racism hashtag was blowing up. Investors were pulling out. The company's stock was tanking. Victoria, for the first time, looked at me not with contempt, but with something closer to fear. Who are you? She whispered. I stood up, handed her my card. CEO and founder, Carter Global Investments, Forbes Top 50, Harvard, all of it, and you could see the realization hit her like a freight train. 6 months we've been evaluating Sterling. I told her. Today was your final test, not of your numbers, but of your values. As she sat there, her world crashing down, the phone rang again. Suspension from the National Association of Technology Companies, pending investigation into discrimination. I just looked at her and said, your reputation was destroyed by your own actions. I just documented it. You could see the fight go out of her, but even then, she tried to bargain. We can fix this, make a deal, but I shook my head. You can't buy the kind of change you need. You have to become it. As I left that boardroom, reporters already crowding the entrance, justice for Daniel trending, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness, not because I destroyed Victoria, but because I knew how many others had never gotten their chance to fight back. Marcus called me later, grinning. Forbes want to put you on the cover, the man who turned humiliation into revolution. But I told him, it was never about me. It's about making sure the next person doesn't have to go through this. 6 months down the line, I'm in my new office, top floor, Manhattan, the same city that once felt like it belonged to people like Victoria. Carter Global is booming. Companies everywhere want our ethical audit. Maria, a young entrepreneur I invested in, tells me her edtech startup is worth $2 million now. She was rejected 16 times before someone gave her a shot. Your success proves determination always wins out, I tell her. Every time I hire someone, every time we launch a new mentorship, I remember that boardroom not as the place I took revenge, but the place I proved you could win without stooping low. As the sun sets, I look out over the city, thinking about all the no's I heard coming up, all the ways people tried to tell me where I didn't belong. Victoria tried to teach me my place. Instead, I changed the map for everyone who comes after. Maybe that's the real win. Not beating your enemies, but building something so good, their hate just turns to dust in your rear view. So, tell me, where do you stand on this? Does justice mean bringing down the bad guys, or building something so bright that the old world can't survive? Drop your thoughts below, because at the end of the day, real change only happens when all of us demand better together.